G'day, Paul Lyons here. Paintings from the lockdown. This is number 24, I think. 24? Yes. So it's going to be a painting looking south from Lake Taupo towards Tongariro, Ngarahoe, Ruapehu, that sort of general high country area. And there's a whole mass of lines on the paper that I've drawn already. So basically there's a tree growing up and around, and there's lake at the bottom of the picture, and the mountains sort of in the middle there. So the tree is in bloom at the time, so I'm going to start off by laying in a fair amount of blossom, and the idea is that I will then mask that and lay in other colours over the top. But there's quite a lot of this yellow blossom that's going to end up in various places. And it's not just yellow, it's yellowy with red at the bottom of each blossom, or it seems to be that there's a spot of red or a red contribution. So I guess the idea is that I will add a little red to these things. Red is incredibly, or the red I use anyway, is a very strong pigment, so I'm kind of hoping that it doesn't overwhelm the yellow. It'll be interesting to see what I manage to do if it does. Okay, so that's a fair amount of yellowness. Now let's see if we can do this red without overwhelming everything. It doesn't look too bad, but the brush isn't really quite behaving itself. It needs to have more pigment on it, which is... no, that's not alright. It's actually not diffusing over the yellow very much at all. Somewhat to my surprise. I was anticipating it was going to take over completely. Instead of which it's just staying where I'm putting it. No idea what sort of a tree this is. Alright, that'll do. And there's more blossom up here on this part of the tree, but that seems to be more in shade. And there's quite a lot of it. So I'll put in a whole array of blossoms up here, and leave until later the stems that they're attached to. And also, as I say, it's a lot of it seems to be in shade, so having carefully masked them, I won't treat them, I don't think, at this stage any differently from the other ones, they would all end up being masked. I suppose I could put them in dark now, but just seems as though it might be easier to treat them all the same way and then just make the dark ones darker at the end. And again, I don't think I particularly want to although there are some there that will just act as a more of a frame for the mountain. Alright, that gives us another bunch of blossom. And it's kind of acting as a, I mean the tree will do this as well, but as a framing device for the mountains in the middle. So that's the first phase completed, to be followed by drying. Find my heat gun. One of the reasons I lift the paper off the board when I'm using the heat gun on it is that too much heat on the acrylic will bend it permanently, and I don't want that to happen. The heat gun is 1600 watts, which is a fair amount of heat, and it turns out to be the same as my wife's hairdryer, but the hairdryer doesn't get to the same high temperature, presumably because it passes more air over the heating element, so the air doesn't get quite as hot. But either of them is effective at drying the paint. So I'm not trying to cover these areas perfectly. I am trying to keep the masking fluid inside the spots of colour, on the basis that I don't really want to have a whole lot of white paper shining through, but if there are little bits of colour that escape from underneath the mask, that's not a big deal. They'll just get covered by other coloured paint when I put in the tree branches and the surface of the lake. So provided I don't leave great splodges of rubber latex going all the way over the white paper, we should be fine. Alright, that's the second phase done. And here we go with the heat gun again. I think that's dry enough. It looks as though it hasn't dried, but it seems to be not picking up with my fingers, so we'll chance it. Okay, so the next thing is, well, one of these areas, I suppose. Sky, hills, lake, doesn't really matter, I don't think which one we deal with first of all. Righto, so I think that the sky is the logical thing to deal with next. And turn the paper upside down because I need to wet the sky area without getting water on the snow-clad tops of the mountains. Try to be fairly careful about this because it's very easy to, because I'm cutting in around the tops of these hills, it's very easy to find that in fact the amount of water at the tops of the hills is much less than it is on the rest of the sky. So you spread water liberally over the rest of the sky. I must say there must be something in the brush which I don't want because it's colouring it, isn't it? But you spread water liberally over the rest of the sky, and because you're going so carefully around the edges of the mountains, they end up being that area ends up being less wet than the rest of it. So it's a good idea to spend quite a while trying to ensure that the water, the wetness is approximately equivalent there. Alright, so let's put in some sky colour, and we'll just use phthalo blue for that, nothing special about it. It's looking fairly strong blue at the moment, but as we know, watercolour dries lighter, so this will lighten considerably. See how there's a difference at that edge there where I'm cutting it in. So this will dry quite a lot lighter, and we'll get a reasonably understated sky. Bit of sky sneaking down into the hills there, which I don't really want, but it probably won't show up too badly. And yeah, this is moving a little bit across the sky, but not all that much, so we'll wet it again, and that will encourage it to move. And carefully try to avoid getting rivulets running down the sides of the mountains, but we're sort of evening the wash over the surface of the paper. Just try and get up to that top left hand corner and down a bit, and try and move the paint over that area, get it away from the mountains, slowly filling in, trying to fill in this area here without ending up a big dark line at the mountains. I think that's getting pretty close to acceptable. Getting dark all the way to the edge of the paper there, and just moving over. And I think that'll probably do us as a wash. Just let's get rid of the large amount of liquid that's collected on the edge here. Just let it wick into the towel, and let's dry it before it has a chance to do any nasty things. That hasn't worked out too badly, with one small problem, which is that this mountain isn't quite that shape at the top, and that's something that people will tend to notice. So I need a clean brush really, that won't do. Use this one, which I think is, it feels as though it's got some gunge in it as well. Let's see. Maybe slightly less gungy than the last one. Oh, wait a minute, I've got a big bottle of water down here that I can dip the brush into. Better than spraying it. Now, it's just the merest bit of blue sky that I need to, there you are, introduced to form just a little dip at the top of the mountain there, because it's not quite as curvy as the shape that in fact there's a bit more of a dip there as well. Really, because this didn't, I managed to get the sky coming over the mountain there. But that'll do. It's an approximation. So now let's do a bit more blue. Now I've represented some of these parts of the tree by a pair of lines representing the outside of the trunk or the branch, and some of them are just represented by a line up the middle, so that's actually meant to be quite a thick branch there. So I'm not going to try and cut in around these branches with the colour of the lake. What I'll do is put the lake colour over and just live with the fact that the blue will show through the branches, so they probably, well, they won't end up as light as they probably ought to in places, but you make compromises, I guess. So do I want, perhaps I'll put some water over the lake. So that the paint doesn't end up being really difficult to spread. That's a reasonably straight line. This is not a sparkly lake. Well, it is from time to time, of course, but at the moment in the scene that I'm painting, it's not. It's got a few, you see that starting to dry differentially, and the same thing up there. It's, messing up my straight horizon line. So again, we've got a reasonably dark colour that will lighten as the paint dries. So the water is not completely even. I might darken up a little bit near the top edge though, just to get a bit of feeling that there's some reflection in the water of the dark mountains without being explicit about their shape. Okay. Right, so more drying. And there must have been an earthquake because there's a tsunami making its way across the lake. So I might try and deal with that now. Thought I was a straight edge, and yeah, I'll try and rule a line. I don't want the straight edge to be right on the paper, because if I do that, the paint will creep underneath. So let's see if we can find a way of just lifting that off the paper. Somebody's business card. Business cards do come in useful, don't they? And somebody else's business card. Just fold them over enough to lift the ruler off the paper, and I'll try to rule a line quickly and then get it off the paper. There we go. So that's done the line. We've still got a bit of a bump there. And now, of course, I need to get rid of the other side of the line. So just rub it out a little bit so it's not quite as hard-edged. That'll do. That's hidden it reasonably well, I think. Okay, so that's feeling reasonably dry. And now maybe the background hills, which are hill colour, which is mostly blue. So there's going to be a lot of blue in this paper, because this painting, because of course the snow reflects the colour of the sky. So the snow is blue. So this is the mountains in the background, below the snow line, quite blue. Don't know whether it's bushclad at that point or not. It probably is, I think. It's just difficult to tell. And again, this doesn't really matter if it goes below the next layer of mountain, because that's going to be darker. And there's some snow coming down from that hilltop there. And then we get valleys that are not snow covered, extending up into the mountain. Oh, that should have been connected, shouldn't it? There. So we just got a bit of ragged edge along this section here, and the sky's come down a little bit too far, unfortunately, but we can't do a lot about that at this stage, or indeed any other subsequent stage. What have we got there? Gunge of some sort. Alright, now there is more there are more hills here in front, of varying colours, mostly with a blue tinge to them. So the next one has a fair amount of bush on it, and I'm just going to take it to the top, although it doesn't actually quite go that far. Take it all the way down there, but again it doesn't actually go that far, but because of where I put the first wash, which is not quite dry. I'm kind of stuck with that shape. And again I'm pushing it, hoping that this colour doesn't bleed into the wash above, because I've neglected to dry or allow to dry the wash above. I've realised that when I do these paintings, because I've said that I'm going to do one painting a day during lockdown, I feel under pressure. It's not you guys aren't pressuring me, it's me myself, I'm doing it subconsciously to myself. But I'm making decisions about how long to continue that I might not normally make. I mean, I'm always an impatient painter, but I do sometimes manage to hold myself back and decide to leave something until later, or to allow it to dry. And I don't seem to be doing that to the same extent with these paintings. Areas of difference in the bush. I don't know, different landowners own the different parts of the countryside, and have made different decisions about what to grow, or where some trees have been harvested and other trees haven't. I don't know what the reason is, but there are differences. which I guess is all to the good, given that what we're trying to do is to produce a painting with a bit of variation in it. And there's something fairly dark on this left-hand end as well. It's not quite clear how far that extends because it's behind a tree branch. So we'll and hope that some landowner doesn't use my painting as evidence in a court case. Look, see, when he painted this picture the crops came down to there and you've done such and such and thing, which wouldn't be a good thing at all. Alright, so let's introduce a bit of yellow into this colour so it's vaguely heading towards green, again because of some different crop, presumably tree crop, down at this part of the base of, towards the base of the mountain. Even that out. All right. That just about do, I think. Okay. So where to from here? Let's do a little bit more work on the lake, because that is somewhere that there are waves and variation. As I say, it's not a sparkling lake at this point, but it does have some indication of surface texture. And oh, there's a drop of water there. Where that came from? No idea where that came from. But anyway, it's sort of helping with the suggestion that there are waves on the water. So just using the another drop of water. Where did that come from? Just appeared on the paper. That's extraordinary. It doesn't appear to be coming from the ceiling. Maybe it's, might be leaking out of the back end of the brush, back into the ferrule here. So we're just trying to make this mountain seem as though it has some sort of, as though the paper is not quite, just enough to indicate that the paper is not a completely flat surface. And the amount of paint you want to do that is very small. Just the merest suggestion of shadows on these mountains should be enough. Or rocks. So just picking up tiny little amounts of paint. And I think I might, might just be something there. Just a slight shadow, and a bit there as well. So I guess, because I can't remember what time I took the photograph that I'm using to base this on, but I guess if this side of the mountains is slightly darker, that's towards the east, so that suggests that this is the afternoon. Which I guess, since we'd driven up from Palmerston North, is not completely outlandish. So there doesn't seem to be very much in the way of shadow on the left hand side here in the photograph that I'm basing this on, but I'll put some in all the same, again just to suggest that there is some shading on that side of the mountain. And maybe in there as well, there's a valley, or is it a glacier? That'll do. I think we'd better stop messing around with the mountain at that point. So do a bit around here where the rocks are sort of blending in with the snow, so that it's not quite as stark a contrast between the two of them. All right, now we get on to the fun part. Is it the fun part, do you think? Or the difficult part? I'm not sure which. How am I going to paint these tree limbs? Looking not unlike a tree limb. And then there's it's not going to work too well for thin tree limbs, is it? Well, not with that brush anyway. So let's see if we can press a thinner brush into service. Don't want to make it too fat. On the other hand, I don't want to I don't want the lines to be too neat and curvaceous, because this tree is quite gnarly. So having made that too fat there, I'm going to have to widen the rest of the branch back here, which isn't too bad, because of course branches get thinner as they get further away from the the trunk. It's all gone a bit dark bluish, but oh well. We'll live with it. Well, you don't have to live with it. You can turn your television or your screen off. It's me that's got to live with it. I did one of these trees that is non-naturalistic colours the other day, and my wife said, "Oh, you know that tree's red, don't you?" Oh, yeah. I wasn't particularly concerned about it being red. Nothing much there. And I don't want to do too much there because I've got a whole bunch of masking fluid covering over the flowers. Don't muck around too much with that. Oh, there was a bit more up there, wasn't there? And the lines I carefully drew at the bottom have, to a large extent, disappeared, but they were indicative of, or they were meant to be indicative of, a fairly broad, dark trunk going to... Oops, I didn't mean to do that. But oh well, make it a point that various tree limbs come out of. Credit card time. Alright, I think I might start thinking about whether or not that's sufficiently well defined to stop. I might just add a bit of colour above here so that I can scrape it away, because otherwise that's a very solid piece of pigment, as is this. Yeah, alright. I think we'll leave the main structure of the tree at that, and start putting in a bit of support for some of these flowery things. Which appear to be reasonably heavy. I wonder if they're fruit. They seem to be hanging down. Even as I paint in some that's sticking up, they seem to be hanging down to a greater extent than they are sticking up. And there seem to be a lot of stalks that they are hanging from. I don't know whether that means, or I don't know what. I'm sure it means something, but I'm not sure what, how to interpret it. Not being a plantologist. Not much I can do with stems in that dark area. Actually quite a lot of tree that I haven't really painted in. It's quite complicated in this little region. Alright, are we feeling there's a certain amount of finishedness about this? There's a distinctly different blue area here from the area there, which is not supposed to be the case. I'm loath to venture in with too much enthusiasm. Yeah, so it's going to produce a very dark colour, isn't it? Maybe if I dilute it a bit. Well, it's not too bad, I think. Just take that down there a little bit and then feather it a bit. As though I was drawing with a pencil. That might do. Filling in some little white spots that really probably aren't doing very much damage to the picture. But, I think it's leave it there time, don't you? So we'll do a bit of drying. And then a bit of removing of masking fluid. that pretty much clears all of it off. Feel a bit there somewhere. Oh, there we go. A few odds and ends. And what do you reckon? Is that that's all right, isn't it? Not too bad. Right. Thank you for watching. See you next time.